Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Latrice Monroe. I am 36 years old, and for 10 years I believed my marriage was the safest place in my life. That belief died the night my husband, Quentin Monroe, stood in the doorway of our bedroom in Shaker Heights and said, "Pack your bags tonight, Latrice. After the will reading tomorrow, you are out of here." He did not look at me when he said it. He kept staring at his phone, probably texting Tamara Ellis, the assistant he had been sleeping with for the last 18 months. I sat on the edge of the bed with my hands folded in my lap, not because I was calm, but because I had run out of ways to break. I had discovered the affair 9 months earlier. I had watched him lie, smile, and come home smelling like expensive perfume that was not mine. By that night, my tears had already been spent. Quentin finally looked up and said, "Did you hear me? Tomorrow morning at 9, Marshall Coleman reads Dad's will. I get everything, and you get nothing. You signed the prenuptial agreement, remember? You leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Nothing." That was what he wanted me to believe. He wanted me to feel like a woman with no money, no job, no family, and no future. The truth was more complicated. I had signed that prenuptial agreement when I was 27 and in love. Vernon Monroe, Quentin's father, had quietly advised me to have my own lawyer review it, but I had been too trusting then. Quentin stepped closer and said, "I even found you a studio apartment on the east side. It is cheap, which is perfect for you. You will need a job quickly, because I am not paying support after tomorrow." His cologne filled the room. Years ago, that scent had made me feel loved. Now it made me feel trapped. Quentin smiled with cruel satisfaction and said, "Tamara and I are getting married as soon as the divorce is done. We will live here in the house my father left me. Do not take jewelry, documents, or anything valuable. I have cameras now." I looked at him and said, "Your father loved you, Quentin. Even when you stopped visiting his room. Even when you treated him like a burden." Quentin laughed. My father was confused half the time, but he was clear enough to leave everything to his only son. Then he paused at the door and added, "Tamara is coming over tonight. We are celebrating early. You can sleep in the guest room. Actually, no. Sleep in the basement. I do not want you near us." The door slammed, but I did not move. What Quentin did not know was that I had stopped being careless months earlier. After I discovered the affair, I opened a private email account, photographed receipts I found in his suit pockets, copied suspicious bank notices before he could hide them, and saved every message Tamara sent me by mistake and then tried to delete. After Vernon's funeral 3 weeks earlier, Marshall Coleman quietly handed me his card and told me to call if I felt unsafe. I did. He referred me to a family attorney named Denise Hill, who told me, "Do not threaten him. Do not destroy anything. Preserve proof. If he tries to force you out of the marital home, document it." So while Quentin thought I was just a defeated wife, I was learning how to protect myself. That night, before I carried my bag downstairs, I placed my phone in my robe pocket and started a voice memo for my own safety. The basement was cold, unfinished, and smelled faintly of dust and paint. I sat on the old couch Vernon used to tease Quentin about throwing away and listened as Tamara arrived upstairs. Then I heard other voices. Quentin had invited 2 people from the office, Wesley Grant and Paige Sutton, both of whom had smiled in my face at company dinners while whispering about me when they thought I could not hear. Through the cracked basement door, I heard Quentin say, "This house is basically mine now. Tomorrow is just a formality." Wesley laughed and said, "So you are really sending Latrice away?" Quentin answered, "Why would I keep her? She has no career, no money, and no purpose here." Tamara said, "Some people do not know when to leave with dignity." Paige laughed at first, then asked, "You actually made her sleep in the basement?" Quentin said, "She should get used to living beneath me." I stood in the dark with one hand pressed over my mouth. The humiliation hurt, but the laughter hurt worse because it turned my private grief into entertainment. I let the recording run long enough to capture Quentin's threat, Tamara's insults, and the way they mocked Vernon's death like his life had only been an obstacle to their comfort. Then I sent the file to my private email and to Denise Hill. I did not do it because I wanted revenge. I did it because I had finally accepted that people like Quentin were most dangerous when they believed nobody could prove what they had done. Around 2 in the morning, Tamara came downstairs, unsteady from wine, and found me sitting on the couch. Tamara said, "You are still here? I thought you would have run away by now." I said, "Please go back upstairs." Tamara walked farther in and looked around with disgust. "This is depressing," she said. "Did Quentin really put you down here? Even I think that is harsh." I said, "Then tell him to stop." She laughed softly. "You still think anyone listens to you?" She sat on the other end of the couch and studied my face. "Can I ask you something? Why did you stay so long? You had to know he stopped loving you." I looked at the woman who had helped break my marriage and said, "I stayed because I took my vows seriously. I stayed because I was caring for Vernon when his own son would not. I stayed because I was not raised to abandon people when life becomes difficult." Tamara's expression tightened. "If you had been a better wife, maybe Quentin would not have needed me." I answered, "If Quentin wanted a better marriage, he should have been a better husband." She left after that, but sleep did not come. I lay under an old blanket and thought about Vernon. 3 years earlier, Vernon had suffered a stroke that left his right side weak and his speech slow. Quentin wanted to place him in a nursing facility immediately. Quentin said, "He is done. There is no point turning this house into a hospital." I had never fought my husband often back then, but I fought him on that. Vernon had raised Quentin alone after Quentin's mother, Evelyn, left when Quentin was 13. Vernon had built Monroe Precision Components from a rented warehouse in Cleveland into a respected manufacturing company that supplied machine parts across the Midwest. He deserved care, dignity, and patience. So Vernon moved into the downstairs bedroom, and I became his primary caregiver. At first, Vernon was frustrated by his body. His hand shook when he tried to hold a spoon. His mouth fought him when he tried to form words. I learned his physical therapy exercises. I labeled his medication. I read to him in the evenings and sat with him through the slow, painful work of speech recovery. Quentin barely entered the room unless a doctor or board member was visiting. In public, he performed concern beautifully. He could put one hand on Vernon's shoulder and say, "Dad is a fighter," with tears in his eyes. People believed him because Quentin had charm. He knew when to lower his voice, when to smile, when to look wounded. Behind closed doors, he called Vernon embarrassing and complained about the cost of care. That public mask was part of what made the betrayal so painful. People saw a devoted son. I saw the truth. Vernon saw the truth too. As his speech improved, we had long conversations in the garden. He told me how he started the company by making bearings for industrial machines, how he won clients by keeping promises, and how one bad part could destroy years of trust. Vernon said, "Business is not complicated, Latrice. Do good work. Keep your word. Treat people fairly. The hard part is doing those simple things when greed offers you a shortcut." He taught me how to read profit statements, how to judge a contract, and why a company should never sacrifice quality to impress one client. I had once worked as a junior analyst before marriage, and those conversations woke up a part of my mind I thought I had buried. Quentin thought I spent 3 years changing sheets and pouring soup. Vernon knew he had been training me to stand. 9 months before the will reading, I stopped by Quentin's office with lunch. Tamara was not at her desk, and Quentin's door was open just enough for me to hear her laugh. Tamara said, "When are you leaving her?" Quentin answered, "Once Dad dies and I inherit everything. The prenuptial agreement protects me. Latrice gets nothing." Tamara said, "She is so trusting it is almost sad." Quentin laughed and said, "Trusting is another word for useful." I walked away before they saw me. I sat in my car for almost an hour, shaking so hard I could not start the engine. That evening, Quentin came home, kissed my cheek like nothing had happened, asked what was for dinner, and said he was going back out for a client meeting. When he left, I went straight to Vernon's room. Vernon looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "What did he do?" I told him everything. I expected anger, but what crossed his face was grief. Vernon said, "I knew my son was cruel. I did not know he had become this shameless." I cried then and said, "I have no savings, Vernon. I left my career for this marriage. I am trapped." He took my hand with his good hand and said, "No, you are not. Quentin thinks he has won because he thinks money is the only kind of power. He is wrong." Then he told me he had hired a private investigator 3 months earlier, not because of the affair alone, but because money had been disappearing from the company. Vernon said, "He has been stealing for 2 years. I have bank records, forged approvals, false vendor invoices, and names. I needed proof before I acted." I asked, "Are you going to turn him in?" Vernon looked toward the window for a long time before he answered, "Yes, but carefully. I loved him before I knew who he would become. That love made me slow, but it will not make me blind. 6 weeks before the will reading, Marshal Coleman came to the house while Quentin was at work. Vernon wore his good navy shirt, and I helped him to the study. Before I left the room, Vernon squeezed my hand and said, "Whatever happens, you are going to be all right." I did not know exactly what he meant. I knew he was changing something, but I did not know the details. 3 weeks later, Vernon died peacefully in his sleep. I found him in the morning, his face calm, his body finally free. I cried like I had lost my own father. Quentin barely cried at the funeral. He gave a short speech about Vernon's business accomplishments, then spent the reception accepting condolences from people he wanted to impress. When I spoke, I talked about Vernon's patience, his humor, his discipline, and the way he thanked me every night, even when I was only bringing him water. Afterward, Marshal Coleman approached me near the chapel doors. Marshal said, "Mrs. Monroe, the will reading is scheduled 3 weeks from today, 9 in the morning. Do not be late." Then he lowered his voice and added, "And if your husband attempts to intimidate you before then, call me." That was when I began to understand that Vernon had left behind more than memories. He had left a plan. The morning of the will reading, I showered in silence and chose a simple black dress. I tied my hair back, put Vernon's letter opener from his desk into my purse because it made me feel close to him, and checked that my recordings and documents were backed up. Quentin came into the kitchen wearing his best suit. Tamara followed in a red dress that looked more appropriate for a celebration than a legal meeting. Quentin looked at my suitcase by the front door and smiled. "Good," he said. "At least you can follow instructions." I said, "A will reading does not give you the legal right to lock me out of this house." His smile slipped. "Do not start acting educated now, Latrice." I said, "I am not acting." Tamara looked away first. Quentin drove us downtown to Marshal Coleman's office in Cleveland. Tamara sat in the front seat, discussing lunch reservations and paint colors for the bedroom, as if I were already gone. I sat in the back, watching the city pass by, and I felt strangely clear. I was afraid, but not helpless. I had proof. I had legal advice. I had Vernon's lessons. We arrived 5 minutes before 9. Marshall's receptionist led us to a conference room with a long walnut table and windows overlooking Public Square. Marshal Coleman was already there, dressed in a gray suit, with organized folders in front of him. He greeted us professionally, but when his eyes met mine, his expression softened for 1 second. That 1 second steadied me. Marshall said, "We are here for the reading of the last will and testament of Vernon Monroe, executed 6 weeks ago, witnessed and notarized according to Ohio law." Mr. Monroe was evaluated by his physician, Dr. Leonard Hayes, who confirmed he was of sound mind when he signed the document. The execution was also recorded to address any later challenge. Quentin leaned back, confident again. "Dad and I discussed this years ago," he said. "Everything goes to me." Marshall looked at him calmly. "Your father made several changes after that discussion." Quentin frowned. Marshall continued, "For clarity, this reading concerns estate distribution. Separate legal matters involving Monroe Precision Components are being handled by corporate counsel and the appropriate authorities." That sentence made Quentin sit forward. Marshall read the opening clauses first, then paused at the first bequest. "To my son, Quentin Monroe, I leave the sum of $1. Silence filled the room. Quentin blinked. "Excuse me?" Marshall said. "Your father included this specific bequest to show that you were not forgotten or accidentally omitted." His intention was deliberate. Quentin's face hardened. "That is not possible." Marshall read on. "To my daughter-in-law, Latrice Monroe, I leave my residence in Shaker Heights, my personal investments, my bank accounts, and my 80% ownership interest in Monroe Precision Components, giving her controlling ownership of the company." I gripped the arms of my chair. I had hoped Vernon had protected me somehow. I had not imagined this. Tamara's hand slowly dropped from Quentin's arm. Quentin stood so fast his chair struck the wall. "She manipulated him," he shouted. "She spent 3 years whispering in his ear while he was sick." Marshall opened another folder and said, "Your father anticipated that accusation." He turned a tablet toward us. Vernon appeared on the screen, seated in Marshall's office, wearing the navy shirt I had buttoned for him. His speech was slower than it had been before the stroke, but every word was clear. Vernon said, "If Quentin claims Latrice manipulated me, let this recording answer him. I am of sound mind. I understand my estate. I understand my son. I also understand the woman who cared for me when my own child treated me like an inconvenience. My vision blurred. Vernon continued. I am not rewarding Latrice for marrying Quentin. I am honoring her character. On the video, Vernon took a breath and said, Quentin, I loved you as my son, but love does not require me to finance your cruelty. You betrayed your wife. You neglected me. You damaged the company I built. I leave you $1 because that is more respect than you showed the people who trusted you. The video ended. Quentin lunged toward the tablet, but Marshall moved it out of reach and pressed a button on the conference phone. 2 security guards entered before Quentin could cross the room. Marshall said, Mr. Monroe, you will sit down or you will be removed. Quentin pointed at me and said, You think you won? You know nothing about running a company. I looked at him through my tears and said, I know how to keep my word. Vernon taught me that. Marshall gathered the estate documents and said, There is more you need to understand, Mr. Monroe. Monroe Precision's corporate counsel has completed a forensic review. The findings include false vendor invoices, unauthorized transfers, forged approvals, and misuse of company funds. A report has been delivered to the county prosecutor. You have been removed from all company systems pending formal proceedings. Tamara whispered, Quentin, what is he talking about? Quentin snapped, Be quiet. It was the first time I saw her understand that she had not attached herself to a powerful man. She had attached herself to a falling one. Marshall added, Miss Ellis, Human Resources has placed you on administrative leave pending investigation into conflict of interest violations, false expense approvals, and misuse of company time and resources. Tamara's face went pale. Security escorted them out. I followed with Marshall because I needed air. In the lobby, Wesley and Paige were waiting near the elevators with a small gift bag and a bottle of champagne. They had come to continue the celebration. They saw Quentin being held by security, saw Tamara crying, saw me walking behind them with Marshall at my side. Wesley's grin disappeared. Paige looked from Quentin to me, and shame moved across her face. Quentin barked, Tell them this is a mistake. Paige stepped back. No, she said quietly. I heard enough last night. Wesley would not meet my eyes. Tamara reached for him, but he turned away too. The elevator doors opened, and Quentin was taken downstairs shouting that he would fight everyone. This time, nobody laughed with him. Back in the conference room, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the water Marshall gave me. I said, I do not understand. Everything. Marshall said, Not everything. Vernon was precise. You inherit the house, his personal estate, and his 80% controlling interest in the company. The remaining shares stay with minority shareholders. The board cannot refuse your ownership, but it will meet Monday to recognize the transfer and approve an interim leadership structure. That sounded more real than a fairy tale, and more frightening too. I said, I am not ready to be a chief executive officer. Marshall nodded. Vernon did not expect you to walk in unprepared. He named you chair of the board, and he recommended that Bernard Hale, the chief operations officer, manage daily operations during transition. Corporate counsel Anita Ross will guide compliance. My role is the estate. Then Marshall handed me an envelope with my name written in Vernon's careful handwriting. He wrote this 2 days before he died, Marshall said. Take your time. When he left the room, I opened it. Vernon had written, Dear Latrice, if you are reading this, I am gone, and Quentin has learned the cost of underestimating people. You are probably shocked. Let yourself be shocked, but do not let shock make you small. I chose you because I watched you live with integrity when nobody was rewarding you for it. I watched you care for me, listen to me, challenge me, and learn. You never asked me for money. You never treated me like a doorway to wealth. You treated me like a person. That is rarer than money. The letter continued, I know the company will frighten you. That is good. Fear means you understand the weight of responsibility. I left notes for you in my safe deposit box. Client histories, board concerns, people you can trust, people you should watch, and mistakes I made so you do not have to repeat them. Do not try to rescue Quentin from consequences. Mercy without accountability becomes permission. Let the law do its work. Take care of yourself. Sell the house if it hurts too much. Keep it if it gives you strength. But do not live inside pain just because pain came with expensive walls. Build a life that belongs to you. With love and respect, Vernon. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried until I could breathe again. That afternoon, Marshall arranged for an estate advance so I could stay at a hotel without using company money. Denise Hill filed paperwork to prevent Quentin from locking me out or removing property from the house. Anita Ross sent formal notices to the board, and Bernard Hale called me personally. Bernard said, "Mrs. Monroe, Mr. Vernon told me this day might come. I will not pretend the company is calm, but I will help you get through Monday." I appreciated that he did not flatter me. He sounded serious, tired, and honest. That night, I slept in a hotel room overlooking Lake Erie with Vernon's letter on the nightstand. I woke up twice reaching for a life that was already gone. Freedom, I learned, can feel like grief before it feels like peace. The next morning, I returned to the house with Denise, a locksmith, and a security consultant arranged through the estate, not the company. Quentin had no legal right to enter without notice, but we still followed proper procedure. I walked through the bedroom where he had ordered me to pack, then down to the basement where I had spent the coldest night of my marriage. The old blanket was still on the couch. I stood there for a long time. Denise said gently, "You do not have to decide today." I said, "I already know." That house had Vernon's roses, but it also held too much humiliation. I would secure it, inventory it, and sell it when the estate allowed. I was not going to build my healing in the same rooms where Quentin had tried to erase me. Monday's board meeting was tense. 6 directors sat around a polished table at Monroe Precision Components, while I sat at the head because Vernon's documents said I should. Anita Ross explained the ownership transfer. Marshall explained the estate authority. Bernard explained the operational risks caused by Quentin's removal. Some directors looked at me with doubt they were too polite to say aloud. One of them, Martin Voss, asked, "Mrs. Monroe, with respect, what do you know about precision manufacturing?" I opened the folder Vernon had left me and said, "I know the Dayton contract is at risk because Quentin approved cheaper alloy for a part that required higher tolerance. I know 2 supervisors warned him in writing. I know Vernon believed quality failures cost more than delays. So my first decision is to halt that shipment until Bernard confirms it meets specification." Bernard looked at me then and nodded. I did not become brilliant overnight. I asked questions. I took notes. I admitted what I did not know. For the first 90 days, Bernard ran operations, Anita handled compliance, and I spent 10 hours a day studying Vernon's files. I met machinists on the floor, not for photographs, but to listen. One supervisor, Rhonda Bell, told me, "Your husband made people afraid to report problems." I said, "That ends now." We created a confidential reporting line, froze questionable vendor accounts, and cooperated with investigators. The first month was ugly. A supplier threatened to sue. A client demanded a discount for delays. 2 managers loyal to Quentin resigned before they could be questioned. It was not a smooth victory. It was work, but every hard day felt cleaner than one easy day beside Quentin. Tamara came to see me 6 weeks after the will reading. Human Resources had fired her after confirming she had approved false travel expenses for trips she took with Quentin and helped conceal his use of company funds. She waited in the lobby wearing a plain gray coat, without the confidence I remembered. I almost refused to see her, but part of me wanted to look at the woman who had once come to my basement to measure my defeat. In the small conference room, Tamara said, "I am sorry." I said, "For the affair or for losing your job?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Both. Quentin told me you were cold, that the marriage was over, that you only stayed for money." I said, "And you believed him because it made your choices easier." She looked down. "Yes," I said, "I accept that you are sorry. I do not accept you back into my life." She nodded like she deserved that, then left quietly. Quentin called me from jail 2 months later after his bond was revoked for contacting a witness. I almost did not answer, but Denise advised me to take the call with her present because he had been threatening to contest the will and accuse me publicly. His voice sounded smaller through the phone. Quentin said, "Latrice, this has gone too far. Tell them you misunderstood. Tell them Dad was angry and confused." I said, "Your father was clear." He said, "I am your husband." I answered, "You were my husband when you made me sleep in a basement. You were my husband when you planned to throw me out. You were my husband when you stole from the company your father built." He was quiet for a second, then said, "So you want me in prison?" I said, "I want the truth to stand." Then I hung up. The legal process took months, not days. Quentin contested the will, but Vernon's medical letter, video recordings, attorney notes, and deliberate $1 bequest made his challenge weak. The probate judge did not reward his anger. In the criminal case, the evidence was worse than Quentin expected. He eventually accepted a plea agreement for felony theft, forgery-related charges, and restitution. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, with eligibility for judicial release after 2 years if restitution and conduct requirements were met. That sentence did not heal me. It did not give Vernon back his final years or return the decade I spent trying to earn love from a man who enjoyed withholding it. But it gave the truth a public record, and that mattered. The divorce was finalized quietly. Quentin asked through his attorney for one private meeting before signing the final papers. Denise told me I did not owe him that, but I agreed to 10 minutes in her office because I wanted to know whether seeing him would still break me. He arrived thinner, angry beneath his forced humility. Quentin said, "I made mistakes." I said, "You made choices." He said, "We had good years, Latrice." I said, "We had years where I was useful to you." He rubbed his face and said, "Can you honestly say you never loved me?" That question hurt because the answer was no. I had loved him. Deeply. Faithfully. Foolishly. I said, "I loved the man you pretended to be. I am divorcing the man you are." After that, signing the papers felt like closing a door without slamming it. I sold the house in Shaker Heights the following spring. Before the sale closed, I dug up one small rosebush from the fence line, the one Vernon used to see from his window, and planted it at my new townhouse in Lakewood. The new place was smaller, bright, and mine in a way the mansion had never been. There was no basement full of humiliation. No bedroom haunted by another woman's perfume. No driveway where I had watched my husband kiss his mistress. On my first night there, I sat on the floor with takeout pasta, Vernon's letter, and a stack of company reports. I cried again, but it was different. I was not crying because I had been discarded. I was crying because I had survived being discarded and still belonged to myself. Monroe Precision did not become perfect under my watch. No real company does. We lost one client Quentin had misled. We paid legal fees that made my stomach hurt. We had to rebuild trust with employees who were tired of speeches and wanted proof. So I gave them proof. We restored safety budgets, ended the fake vendor contracts, paid delayed overtime, and promoted people who had been doing honest work without recognition. 6 months after the will reading, the Dayton client renewed on a smaller but cleaner contract because we admitted the problem and fixed it before shipping bad parts. Bernard said, "Vernon would have liked that." I said, "He would have asked why it took us so long." Bernard laughed, and for the first time inside that company, I did too. Paige Sutton wrote to me after Quentin was sentenced. She had resigned from the company and moved to another firm. Her letter was short. She wrote, "I laughed when I should have spoken up. I watched a man humiliate his wife and told myself it was not my business. I am sorry." I did not answer, but I kept the letter because it reminded me that public cruelty depends on private cowardice. Wesley never apologized. Tamara disappeared from Cleveland after the investigation ended. Evelyn, Quentin's mother, came to see me once. She brought an old photograph of Vernon holding Quentin as a child. Evelyn said, "I left because I was weak then. Vernon stayed and tried. I am sorry my son became another person who left damage behind." I accepted the photograph, not for Quentin but for Vernon. On the first anniversary of Vernon's death, I closed my office early and drove to the cemetery alone. I brought white roses from the bush I had moved to Lakewood. Standing at his grave, I said, "I am still learning." The wind moved softly through the trees. I told him about the company, about the divorce, about selling the house, about the days I still woke up angry and the days I woke up free. I told him I was not completely healed, but I was honest, and I thought he would value that more. Before I left, I placed my hand on the stone and said, "You were right about one thing. Quentin underestimated quiet people." Then I smiled through tears. "But you underestimated how much I would miss you." That evening, I went home, unlocked my own front door, and saw the rosebush through the kitchen window. It had started blooming again. I made tea, opened Vernon's letter, and read the last line one more time. "Build a life that belongs to you." For years, I thought justice would feel loud. I thought it would sound like Quentin shouting in a lobby, Tamara crying, or a judge reading a sentence. Those moments mattered, but real justice was quieter. It was sleeping peacefully in a home where nobody could banish me to the basement. It was signing checks with clean hands. It was saying no to a man I once begged to love me. It was choosing a future that did not require his regret, his approval, or his apology. Quentin tried to send one final message through his attorney before he was transferred. He wrote that prison had changed him, that he understood everything now, that he wanted to talk when he came home. I folded the message once and handed it back to Denise. Denise asked, "Do you want to respond?" I looked out at the street, at people walking freely under the afternoon sun, and I felt no hatred rise in me. Only distance. I said, "No. He can carry his own words now." That was the closure I had not known I needed. Not revenge. Not another argument. Not a speech where I proved my worth. Just silence chosen by me. Quentin had tried to leave me with nothing. Instead, he left me with the one thing I had lost inside that marriage, myself. I still have scars from what happened. I still flinch sometimes when a phone lights up at dinner. I still hate the smell of Quentin's old cologne when it passes me in a store. Healing did not make me untouched. It made me honest about the wound without letting it become my identity. Vernon gave me wealth, yes, and control of a company I never expected to lead. But his greatest gift was not money. It was proof that character can be seen, even when cruelty tries to bury it. The night Quentin sent me to the basement, he thought he was placing me beneath him. He did not understand that rock bottom can become a foundation. I climbed out of that basement with proof, dignity, and Vernon's faith in me. Then I built a life Quentin could no longer enter. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.